what could have been a horrific terrorist attack. French police uncovering this makeshift lab packed with explosive ingredients identical to those used by ISIS in recent attacks. The alleged masterminds behind the deadly plot, 4 people, including a 16-year-old girl who police say is a known ISIS fanatic. The wannabe terrorists accused of planning to target a busy tourist area, in Paris, but are now behind bars. An illegal immigrant caught voting 5 times in the U.S. is sentenced to 8 years in prison and will later be deported. A Texas jury sealing Rosa Ortega's fate after she blatantly registered to vote in multiple cities, even after checking the box on her driver's license that she was not a citizen. Her lawyers calling her punishment harsh, blaming President Trump's crackdown on illegals. Congressman Jason Chaffetz slamming out-of-state radicals for hijacking his town hall meeting, calling them bullies. Well, the should be out of the White House, but Michelle Obama won't stop judging what kids are eating. The former First Lady expected to appear as a judge on the reality show Master Chef Junior. It's a cooking competition for kids between the ages of 8 and 13. During her time in the White House, Mrs. Obama made it her mission to force school children to eat healthier meals in her Let's Move program. A new job for the former First Lady.
And then we get to see a lot of photos of what those meals look like from kids taking photos, and there were some pretty paltry meals.
Go back to eating the cheese dreams that I had in elementary school. The hamburger bun covered in cheese.
Italian dunkers.
So healthy. So
good.
healthy. All right, coming up on the show, some people were shocked when Hillary Clinton lost the election. But apparently Hillary knew the whole time it was going to happen.
And President Trump says big tax cuts are coming soon. What does it mean for your wallet? Professor Brian Brenberg breaks it all down next.
Welcome back. We've got a quick look at your headlines, putting the rumors to rest. Former first daughter Chelsea Clinton says she's not running for Senate during an interview with the New York Post. However, Clinton said nothing to dispel other rumors that she's being groomed to run for a New York congressional seat. We'll see. And did Hillary Clinton know she was going to fail? One of her top aides, Jennifer Palmieri, says Clinton wasn't surprised she lost and almost didn't run in the first place.
She's one of the people who's least surprised that she lost. I think she always, contrary to this view that she, had held on to this dream of being the first woman president, I think she came close to not running in 2016.
Okay, that's some spin. Palmieri says Clinton ran because she thought she was still better than Bernie Sanders. There you have it.
All right, well, this week President Trump followed through on yet another campaign promise, tax reform.
Lowering the overall tax burden on American business is big league. That's coming along very well. We're way ahead of schedule, I believe, and we're going to be announcing something, I would say, over the next 2 or 3 weeks that will be phenomenal in terms of tax.
The president's comments may be resonating with investors. The stock market this week saw a very nice bounce, closing at record highs for the week. Obviously, the Dow above 20,000 still.
Yeah, so what is, from Wall Street to Main Street, what should the middle class expect from the president's tax reform promise?
Here to break it down, our good friend Professor Brian Brenberg, chair of the program in business and finance at King's College right here in New York City. Brian, good morning.
Good to see you guys.
Brian.
So tell us what's coming.
Don't we all want to know, right? And that's the important point is President Trump said 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to let you know where I stand on this. And that's where markets said, great. We just want to know how you line up against what we're hearing from House Republicans, because that's been the big question. They want to see some detail, particularly on things like the border adjustment tax. Is Donald Trump for that? Is he against that? That's going to make a big deal in terms of how big this tax is.
Sandra mentioned the stock market, over 20,000, but most Americans don't care about the stock market. They want to know what the individual plan is going to look like for them and middle-class Americans.
Yeah, well, I think they care about both. To the extent they have a retirement account, they're certainly looking at stock market performance to see how that's doing. But they do want to know what's going to end up in my pocket here. And the answer is they're going to get a tax cut one way or the other. The question is how big this tax cut's going to be. But we know it's going to go for the middle class because both House Republicans and the President, Steve Mnuchin, has been talking about this. They're very focused on middle-class tax cuts. They're going to see more money in their pockets. The question is how big is the business tax cut? And that's a big deal because that spurs hiring, that spurs investment, wage growth. So I think middle-class Americans should look at, not only what is my individual income tax, but what are we going to do for businesses? Because ultimately we want jobs that pay high wages and get us back on that track.
We got to love the nature by which he announced this, saying that there's going to be a phenomenal announcement on taxes in the next couple weeks. And Big League, he referenced it. So the market is setting itself up for something big league here. I mean, you wonder if the expectations are almost too high, considering the run-up in the stock market that we've seen.
Well, it is extraordinary. The opening talked about him delivering on tax reform. He actually is just talking about it. We haven't delivered anything yet, but the market is reacting so strongly. You can see the desire for something to happen here, the sense that we just aren't growing at the rate that we should be growing, and this is part of getting us back to that.
To the Big League point, though, 15% business tax. That's what he wants to get it down to. That would be Big League. Is that going to pass Congress?
I don't think it's going to go to 15. Congress is talking about something more in the 20 range because you have a problem here, and that is when you cut taxes that much, you see big revenue losses for the government. That creates massive deficits, and House Republicans in general, are very concerned about that as well. So I don't think you see a 15% drop, but I think you do see a drop in the 20 to 25 range, which is still a big deal when you're talking about a rate right now that's 35%.
Got to make a big move considering it's promising 4% growth in the first year.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge stretch, and so you do have to do something very big and bold if you're going to get anywhere near that number. Right? Remember,
If it's not Big League, we're going to blame you. Thank you very much.
If it's T-ball, we're going to have you back.
that was a good T-ball player. What can I say?
He was, I can attest.
How could you be mad at T-ball?
Well, the mainstream media went crazy over what they call President Trump's first deportation victim.
Next to De Rayos' window, her two American-born children struggling to stay strong for their mother.
For years, the federal government left Guadalupe Garcia de Rayos alone. Not anymore.
But what they didn't tell you, she's a convicted felon. The insane details next.
And President Trump, are you watching right now? Forget the executive orders. Lindsay Lohan has a solution to the refugee crisis, and she wants to sit down with you at the White House.
Hey, welcome back. She's likely the first illegal immigrant deported under President Trump, and the mainstream media went wild about it.
Carter Evans found a woman caught by this order who had been allowed to remain in Phoenix under President Obama's immigration policy.
Under new rules, President Trump has made any criminal offense criteria enough for deportation.
Next to De Rayos' window, her two American-born children struggling to stay strong for their mother.
The mother of two deported to Mexico. She had been living in the U.S. for decades until an immigration check forced her to leave her children behind.
For years, the federal government left Guadalupe Garcia de Rayos alone. Not anymore.
But aren't the networks missing something like she's a convicted felon?
Here to discuss is staff writer for The Federalist, Bree Payton. Nice to see you this morning, Bree. What happened here?
Right, so in 2008, she was arrested for having a fake Social Security number, and in 2013, a judge ordered that she should be deported to go back to Mexico. And it's taken this long to finally get her to be deported because under President Obama, he was like, oh, we're going to prioritize deporting all of the violent felons before we get to the regular felons. So that's the reason why she's being deported now is because President Trump decided, hey, we're just going to deport all felons regardless of whether or not they're violent or not. So really, it was only a matter of time before she was going to be sent back. It's happening now, and now the media is acting like President Trump is the sadistic meanie who personally called and had her deported, which is absolutely not the case.
So clearly the media you're seeing is blaming the president, Donald Trump. Who should they be blaming?
Right. Well, they should be blaming the failed policies of presidents past. They should be blaming our porous border for allowing her in the first place. They should be blaming lax immigration policies for lulling her into a false sense of security. And I think we should be talking about the fact that she's not the only victim of, failed immigration policies or unenforced immigration policies. Under President Obama, thousands of children crossed into this country illegally, and now the government literally has no idea where they are, and it's likely that they're being trafficked and abused. But I bet a lot of people watching this program right now didn't know about that because the media does not like to talk about the failures of Obama's immigration policies.
No, what they like to talk about was that she was taken away from her children, as ABC News did, and saying that she was sort of ripped out of this country in that way, and they failed to recognize the fact that she was a felon. Do you think also, though, that the administration, the Obama administration sort of lulled her into a false sense of security, of staying here, it's going to be fine?
Yeah, absolutely, right. They were right. She was regularly checking in with ICE, and they were like, okay, we're not going to do anything under President Obama, right? So he was lulling her into a false sense of security and making her think that it was okay for her, to stay here and that it was no problem for her to be here. And that happened a lot, not just under President Obama, but also President Bush, right? A lot of the presidents that we've had aren't willing to enforce the laws that we have on the books. And so a lot of people do think that it's okay to do this when it's not. I mean, I'm a first-generation American. My parents had to wait in line and go through the immigration process legally. So, I mean, it is frustrating for those who had to wait years to watch other people, not have to follow the same rules.
Well, certainly there's a little bit missing from the network coverage of that story. Bree, thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Bree. All right, coming up on the show, we got a big show coming up for you. Geraldo Rivera, Alan Dershowitz, and the Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick all here live this morning.
And Press Secretary Sean Spicer's only been on the job for 3 weeks now. But the White House is reportedly looking for his replacement. Ed Henry joins us live on the Kirby couch this morning to react. Next.
Putting on the Ritz. So this was one of my favorite songs as a child, early 1980s. Wait for it on the radio. Pete, never heard this song?
Never heard this song.
No, Tacos, Putting on the Ritz.
And those of us that have heard it, we're shocked that it was your favorite song.
You loved it. Don't lie.
He also likes Justin Bieber. We've established this on the show.
I did like Steve Miller's Abracadabra was my second favorite.
I'm learning so much about you guys today.
So nice to see you. I can't believe I walk in on that. Putting on that.
I know. Oh, you know what? Today is National Friend Day.
Make a Friend Day.
National Make a Friend Day. So if you don't have a friend, today's the day to do it.
Find a way to make
Sandra, want to make friends with you?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes.
So send us your pictures with your friends this morning. Can you share your pictures with your friends this morning? We'll share them on the air throughout the rest of the show.
Please do.
Only new friends, though, right? It's Make a Friend Day, so you got to meet somebody in the street and make a friend.
Well, some people have been arguing that Donald Trump is friends with Vladimir Putin. He says, look, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we could be seeing some of the fruits of that relationship developing overnight. And one of the latest big headlines, that's why we have Ed Henry here to break this all down for us, is that could the Russian government be ready to hand over NSA leaker Edward Snowden on a silver platter back to the United States? What are you hearing about this, Ed?
I think we've got to be very careful of this because, as you know, you see this on Wall Street, you see it in Washington. It's not just what's being leaked, but who's leaking it. Who has a motive to get this out there? There are some I'm hearing saying, wait a second, this is being leaked by U.S. intelligence to make Donald Trump look bad again. There's already been this war. Why would it make him look bad? Because of what you said. Because it's like, now that he's president, his buddy Vlad wants to turn over Edward Snowden. So I think we have to, a big grain of salt here. Is this true, or is this the intelligence community again saying, he's so buddy-buddy, Donald Trump, with Vladimir Putin, that he may get it? We're hearing this in intercepts and that we're getting intelligence. The other potential leak here is the intelligence community putting it out there because they really want Snowden. They're so angry about all of his leaks that expose the secrets of these surveillance programs, right?
Well,
it caused this big debate here. The Justice Department wants him.
They want him back.
But the intel community wants him as well, so they could have leaked this because they want to see him go to the Justice Department.
But Snowden, for his part, he and his lawyers say, we don't know anything
right,
about
because Snowden is that exactly. And so the intelligence community could be saying, hey, we're hearing this, so that they can get it in front of who? Donald Trump. And say, hey, remember this guy? Because he said he should be executed and all of that. And Putin could be laughing at all of these leaks because maybe he's not going to turn over Snowden, but you got everybody running around on it. So I would take a big grain of salt there.
Grain of salt. Well, There's been some grains of salt taken on immigration and the immigration executive order and the course it's taken through the Ninth Circuit. There's now speculation of what the next move might be from this president. Is it to challenge it further or to issue a new executive order?
I think it's both. I think it's clear that the president at that news conference with Prime Minister Abe of Japan yesterday was suggesting, look, we're going to fight this out in the courts. Remember the tweet the other night, see you in court in all caps, right? But also potentially a new executive order. And I think there's a golden opportunity here for the president, which is to say all of his critics are saying this was hastily done. This is a man who doesn't admit his mistakes. He just wants to tweet about it, and he's going to rush to court. Wait a second. He's preserving his rights in court, but meanwhile come up with a new executive order that's reworked, that is tweaked, and is more bulletproof from court action. And all of a sudden, what is his critics? I mean, his critics are going to criticize him anyway, obviously.
No matter what.
But if you actually have something that's more sound legally and politically, and he can be bigger than his critics. So here's an opportunity for him. By the way, there was something else mentioned at that news conference that nobody followed up about. The president said, as soon as next week, I'm also going to be announcing some big measures. He made it sound like security measures, something beyond vetting, that there would be something new beyond an executive order, something else that's going to be done either at airports or whatnot. Nobody followed up, and I wonder what he's referring to. There could be some more action coming.
Clearly doesn't feel like they need to change the conversation, because even this morning he's doubling down on his insistence that this is a priority for him. He tweeted just this morning, our legal system is broken. 77% of refugees allowed into U.S. since travel reprieve hail from the 7 suspect countries. So dangerous. His point is, we open the door, they rush right in. He has a point.
He has a point that we should be vetting these folks, and you know who agrees with him is Chuck Schumer, at least Chuck Schumer in 2015, who had said, we have to make sure we're vetting people from these sensitive countries like Syria. So what's wrong with vetting? And I think, again, back to my previous point about maybe a reworked executive order, that might be where the White House has struggled a bit, which is that this executive order went a bit further than that. And if you just do something that's tighter on the extreme vetting and is tweaked legally, you keep bringing up the previous soundbites from Chuck Schumer a couple of years ago, who said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with more vetting. And he can come after his critics that way.
It's been an interesting few weeks for White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Yeah. We saw initially he came out and he was sort of mocked, in the media for his larger suits, right? And then they brought in a tailor to the White House to get him tighter suits. Then on Saturday Night Live, he has Melissa McCarthy playing him. And reportedly, the reports are that in the Trump White House, Trump did not like a woman playing his press secretary. There are rumors this morning in the Washingtonian that says that Carl Higbie has interviewed for the position of the White House press secretary. He's been interviewing for that role, according to 2 senior administration officials. We had Corey Lewandowski on the show just a short time ago. And he says, look, he's doing 2 jobs right now. He's doing a communications director role, and he's also press secretary role. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Look, this is by far the most difficult job in Washington. And Sean isn't just the press secretary, you have to remember. He's also doing double duty as a communications director. So Sean's job as the press secretary is secure. I think he's growing into that job behind that podium. It's a very, very difficult job. It was never the plan of the administration to have Sean doing both of those jobs. So my guess is, without any inside information, they're going to find somebody to come in and help him continue to grow out that team, build out the communications team, work with Kellyanne Conway, work with Sean Spicer, work with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the rest of the team so that they can continue to build out the work that they're doing to communicate with the media.
To be clear, we asked Carl Higbie. He hasn't formally interviewed, but you talk about, he said he didn't have inside information. You traffic in inside information.
Yeah,
what are you hearing?
Well, we reported this first Thursday on Fox and Friends and got some pushback from the White House. And what I said on Fox and Friends then was that I was hearing that there were some people being talked to by the president and others about a communications job of some sort, and that I reported that one scenario was Sean Spicer moving to communications director full-time, because yes, he has both jobs, but maybe, I underline, giving up the podium and the press secretary job and it going to somebody else. Now Washingtonian reports, well, maybe Carl Higbie. I don't know if that's accurate. You say you spoke to him.
He tweeted out.
But he tweeted out. I can tell you that there have been other people spotted at the White House in recent days. White House officials are telling me that have been either talking to the president or people around him about a communications job. So the question is it for press secretary or is it for communications director? If that becomes a Washington game of different boxes on a chart, I think the bigger point is the president clearly is not fully happy with the communications job, or he wouldn't be talking to Carl Higbee or anybody else,
Or
right?
is
He'd
it
be
the
saying,
press-
my team is great.
Or is it the press job? I mean, this reminds me of George Stephanopoulos. Remember, he was getting slammed on the podium.
He did an awful job as briefer and moved
then
behind the scenes
exactly,
and made his career as both the Clinton advisor and now obviously at
It's tough, though.
ABC.
It's been, what, 3 weeks now? Yeah. And his tone at the briefings, those daily briefings, it has changed a little bit.
It
It's
has.
like, how much
I think
room
you're
do
absolutely
you
right, Sandra. I think actually that Sean Spicer has been getting better at the podium. I mean, anybody who had been thrown to the wolves on day one, and this press corps has been much more aggressive than previous ones we've seen because all of a sudden it's, we can't stand Donald Trump's executive order. We can't stand this. We can't stand that. So anybody standing at that podium is going to have a hard time. He's gotten better. By the way, the New York Times has a story today saying that the ratings for the briefings, when Fox goes to it live and Outnumbered gets bumped or something and you do it, right?
No,
it's better. It's beating the soap operas. So who knew Sean Spicer, a mid-afternoon rock star?
Well, and he added a new element to it as well in Donald Trump. They added the Skyping.
Yeah, and you know, and a lot of reporters laughed at that at first, you know, Washington insiders, but it actually brought in new voices. And you know what a lot of the outside reporters ask about? Jobs, the economy, things that actually matter in states that Donald Trump wants to talk about. And by the way, the other thing we should point out, in fairness to Sean Spicer, regardless of who the press secretary is, actually, the president himself sometimes is his own press secretary, because you're here saying, he just tweeted this. So Sean Spicer can come up with the greatest plan ever to talk about jobs, and then Donald Trump tweets about immigration, and everybody talks about that.
The chattering D.C. class are going to hate Donald Trump no matter what. I mean, he could give the most perfect briefing, and he's going to get criticized. I mean, it's a really tough spot for him.
It's a tough job, but I think that the bottom line point is that they're talking to a whole bunch of people about maybe, you know, just not shaking it up, but adding some more people.
What's your gut tell you? He moves to communications role or stays in front of the
People
podium?
around, after I reported that on Thursday, people that he might go to communications director full time. People around Sean Spicer told me I was wrong, and that he's staying as press secretary for the foreseeable future, and that if anything, these people are actually being interviewed for communications director,
I mean, that's
and
in
that
line
Sean
with
will stay at the
Corey
podium.
Lewandowski just said.
So that might, Corey might be right.
All right. Very
Great
good.
seeing you guys.
Always solid reporting from Ed
Thank you.
Henry.
Thanks,
Good to
Good
see
seeing
you,
you
sir.
guys.
All right, turning now to your headlines this morning, starting with a Fox News alert. A chilling tip helping police stop a deadly terror plot linked to ISIS. These two men, seen here in this disturbing picture, decked out in camouflage and holding machine guns, arrested in Turkey. The wife of one of the suspects alerting authorities in Istanbul about the two sneaking into the country from Syria.
A couple of students.
Police say the terrorists have been training with ISIS to carry out an attack in Europe but are now behind bars. Hundreds of illegal immigrants arrested in the first enforcement of President Trump's promise to crack down on criminals. ICE agents targeting aliens in 6 states, including major cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. Most of those detained are serious criminals convicted of murder or domestic violence. The Trump brand disappearing from more retailers this morning, specifically Sears and Kmart's websites. Any search for the items sold directly from the retailer comes up empty. Sears is now investigating why the items have vanished. This coming on the heels of Nordstrom dropping Ivanka Trump's clothing line, blaming declining sales. We're now learning most Nordstrom employees who gave election donations backed Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders for president. Is Uncle Joe headed for Tinseltown? The former vice president and his wife Jill recently hiring one of the leading talent agencies in Hollywood to represent them. It's the same agency that works for megastars like Jennifer Lawrence, Brad Pitt, and Will Smith. It's unclear what projects the Bidens are working on, but leaves a lot of room for speculation and fun chatter. All right, and those are your headlines this morning.
Go away.
Fun to see Henry on the couch.
Yeah, we love it.
All right.
All right, check out this woman. Not only did she vote in elections 5 times, wonder who she voted for, but she's also not a citizen. How did that happen?
And the president signed executive orders to back our police this week, but the mainstream media was too busy being the fashion police.
President Trump said he was defending his daughter when he criticized Nordstrom for dropping her clothing line.
So why are they focused on Nordstrom and clothing lines? David Webb is here to discuss that story next.
Look at that clothing line. Dresser.
Crossing the line, the president goes after Nordstrom, and the White House accuses the store of, quote, an attack on Ivanka. Nordstrom says that's not true.
Taking on Nordstrom, President Trump takes direct aim at the department store after learning they are dropping his daughter Ivanka's brand. Tweeting from the official presidential account, Stocks taking a hit in the moments after.
Today, President Trump said he was defending his daughter when he criticized Nordstrom for dropping her clothing line.
All right, so I've got a question. What's worse, a president that criticizes Nordstrom or one that criticizes the police, as our former President Obama did? This week, President Trump, signed executive orders backing law and order. But the liberal press pretty much ignored it. As you can see on the left, the amount of time they spent on Nordstrom. On the right, the amount of time they spent covering these new executive orders on law and order. Are they focused on the wrong things? Here to weigh in, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor David Webb. David, thanks for joining us this morning. So why all the focus on Nordstrom? Why little focus on executive orders?
Look, flood the zone if you're the media and you don't like Trump with every other story but what's important. When he signed those 3 executive orders, he set the standard, or at least reset the standard, on going after transnational gangs, on going after human trafficking, drug cartels, drug trafficking, and going after, and also saying that we, as a federal, agent, or the federal government, when necessary and when it applies, will work to protect our police officers and our law enforcement community at large. There are times when they've been under attack. President Obama criticized the institution of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. He inflamed the tensions. You look at the deaths, the assassination of Wen Jianliu, Rafael Ramos here in New York. You look at others around the country. So what they're doing is they're flooding the zone on Nordstrom's.
And the Nordstrom stories are often one-sided as well, because it's Nordstrom says, well, it's just a business decision. But Nordstrom's been involved in commenting on the president's previous executive order on immigration and refugees.
Right.
So why no examination of the potential political motive of a Nordstrom?
Well, that doesn't matter to the narrative. The narrative is to flood the zone on anything Trump does to distract the American people from the work he's doing. By the way, I'll say this. I personally wish that he hadn't commented on Nordstrom. I understand a father defending his daughter. That is a natural reaction for a good man to defend his daughter, who's been very successful in her own right. She is a rock star. The other part of this is they need to go after her in some way, they being the liberals out there and the progressive left, because she is the example of what you can do when you want to be a successful woman, you work hard at it, and you achieve. So that's a threat to their women's march.
Well, and it's also a threat to the overall narrative of the Trump presidency. If he said he's going to be the law and order candidate, and then on Thursday he signs 3 executive orders to start making that happen, they just don't have an incentive or desire to report on that kind of follow-up.
No, and here's something that I've said on my show repeatedly. Examine the executive orders. I urge people to go read them. Some of them are a page long, 7 pages, 13 pages. You don't have to read an Obamacare-sized bill. But the executive orders that Trump has issued, by and large, are to enforce laws that exist. He's not making new law. That's contrary to what President Obama did.
Precisely.
He wrote executive orders to impede in enforcing our laws. Big difference between the two.
Which is why conservatives are not up in arms over executive orders that simply say enforce the laws that are on the books.
Right. There is a use for executive orders,
sure.
And when used properly, they can help us as a country. When used improperly, they can lead to these situations that have happened with immigration enforcement and many other areas.
David Webb, always a clarifying voice. Thanks, man.
Good to see you.
I have nothing against China. I just hate that their leaders are so much smarter than our leaders. 2016, we will not be the world leader anymore. We have been always. But in 2016, China becomes the great economic leader.
Even if Mitt Romney is elected, he says that
maybe you can turn it around.
Well, do you think he can turn it around?
I think we can.
Do you think Mitt Romney can turn it around?
I think he can.
As a line of clothing. Now, where were these made?
These were made, I don't know where they were made, but they were made someplace. But they're great. It's ties, shirts, cufflinks, everything sold at Macy's, and they're doing great. #1 selling tie anywhere in the world.
#1 selling tie anywhere in the world. You wouldn't wear that shirt?
We also have them in white and beautiful white.
Where are the shirts made? Bangladesh.
Well, it's good.
Okay.
We employ people in Bangladesh.
Ties? Where are the ties
they
made?
Have to work
These are
too.
beautiful ties.
They are great ties.
The ties are made in where? China? Ties are made in China.
Well, I'll tell you, and you know what, David, in all fairness, I've been very open about that, and not all of them, by the way, but I've been very open about that. Are you okay? Is the
no,
chair
I'm
was
fine.
Made in China.
I know.
The chair was made in China.
The chair was made in China.
You buy that at Macy's, by the way.
Let's just shut down the Donald Trump factory in Beijing.
I would love to.
And we'll put up a tie factory in Jamaica, Queens.
I love it.
And we'll make the Donald Trump ties.
I'm for it.